Welcome to the third episode of The Greatest of All Time. Today we'll be doing the top 10 consoles. We have a very, I won't even say varied list because it doesn't vary very much. It's pretty old school. We're old, so.
I think this is probably our bread and butter.
Yeah.
If you look at our production company, I think that's an homage to what we enjoy the most is
Pretty much
video games. So without further ado, here's our list.
Number 10, the Xbox. We of course, just like every week or every month or however often we film this, we thought about number 10, of course. I tied the Xbox to a great memory of back when Cody lived with me, basically. We bought that, and we had a Cake CD, and we played Tony Hawk nonstop with Kevin Stone. And it was probably one of the best. Every time I hear that Cake CD now, I think about playing Tony Hawk on that. So I logged a lot of hours into my Xbox, even after the Tony Hawk, so that's why I added it to the list, and that's why I fought so hard to get it on there after the coin flip.
For me, Fable 1 was a great game. I loved it. I played Fable 2 and 3 for the 360 and just never quite lived up to 1, even though they always say they're getting better. I don't think so at all. I think 1 was great. But other than that, Xbox is, I'm not real. It doesn't do anything for me. I didn't like the first controller. I mean, I don't think anybody did.
Yeah, I was gonna say it had its flaws. You know, the controller was big and bulky, but when they came out with the S. And then you got, I mean, it was so much better, and that's pretty much still the same design they use today. I mean, so it's not as bad, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first controller was a bit bulky. It was like a Atari Jaguar controller.
It was the first one to use a hard drive too.
Yeah.
And I do love that because memory cards were getting to be a hassle back in those days. So.
Well, how many did you have? You know, you'd have a crap ton. We'll talk about that here later, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, memory cards are terrible.
Yeah, it was a bad idea. But yeah, the Xbox was solid, and even after it kind of wore off its the shine, everybody started modding theirs. I modded mine. I've modded 100. I've modded like 100 Xboxes probably. No, I did not. That's illegal, and I would never do anything illegal. But if I were to, I did. But anyway, it came to the point where you could just download any game you wanted.
Yeah.
And so it made the console even more valuable to me. Like, I still have a library of probably 300 burnt DVD, that I use for my Xbox. So, I mean, that's why I made the list. So,
too bad there aren't 300 games to play for the Xbox.
Yes, there is. Thanks, Microsoft.
Number 9, the Neo Geo. Another point of contention for this list. What I think is probably described as the rich kid toy.
Yeah.
Because nobody, even today, it's still a rich kid toy. It's more expensive than any new system that's coming out.
It's like
yet to come in.
$800 on eBay right now to buy one.
Yeah, and I think when it first came out, it was like $600. The games were $200. The games were about this big.
Yeah. But they were. It's running the same processing unit that an arcade machine was.
It was the exact.
I mean, at the time,
thing.
it's basically what it was.
So much so to where when you started the game, it says please insert coin. I mean, it's the same exact game.
It would even go through the same startup.
Yeah.
With like the roster and everything.
The BIOS. Yeah.
I mean,
but that was a really cool thing at that time. It was so advanced because you had I think it was around Super Nintendo, maybe right after
the same
maybe
time.
Virtual Boy area, and then whatever Sega had at that time, the 32X.
I we weren't talking about that.
But yeah, so when you play games like Metal Slug at home, that was just
King of Fighters, I think, was a big one.
It had about 45 different versions of King of.
But I mean, if you look at the graphics on that, I mean, it looks just like it did at the arcade.
Yeah, and actually hook it up today.
Yeah,
and you'll still go, wow, that looks really good.
I guarantee.
I think that a lot of like Xbox Live or PlayStation Network fighting games, that style, it's the same experience. They're still trying to kind of to match what the Neo Geo was doing back then, even though they're clearly superior.
But you paid for it.
Yes, you did.
I mean, and that was the major downfall. I mean, I wasn't going to add it to the list because, to be honest, I've never actually played one. Like, I've never held the controller and played one.
No.
Now, have I went back and played it on an emulator of some sort? Yes. And the games are pretty cool, but I've never actually played one, so that's why I really didn't care to add it to the list. But as far as the unit goes, yes, it does have awesome processing power and awesome graphics, especially for the date.
And maybe a moment of silence for SNK, because that's the company that made the system, and they made some fantastic games throughout back in the NES days. All the way up until they were done for. But really loved SNK.
Yeah, then we all. All right, number 8. We put the PlayStation 3 on there. Number 8. That's probably one of the. That is the newest console.
Yeah.
And probably the only one that's new that made it to the list. And the reason it made my list is because I log a lot of hours on mine. I love the achievement. I love that you can compare with your friends. Although I do wish they would revamp that to where it was a little easier to do. To compare side by side, like all your...
Yeah, it takes a while.
Yeah, it's real long. It takes a while. I wish they'd revamped it to where, like, it would just kind of show you and all your friends list, like, hey, you all have this one. You don't have this that they do. I wish it would do that.
Yeah.
That would be kind of cool. But free online play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's huge for me. That's why I can't stand the Xbox 360, to be honest. Yeah. I don't want to pay another $9.95 or whatever it is a month to play
$60 a year.
Yeah, to play an online game that I've already paid $80 for. I don't want to do that.
It's silly. Yeah, that is silly. I mean, they say it's a superior service. It's the same service.
Yeah, it's exactly.
I mean, there's no
I get nothing more, nothing less.
And to be honest with you, as little as I play games online, I still pay for Xbox Live, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't do anything. I don't play online. I rarely download.
My 360 hasn't been started in any 2 years, maybe.
And it's, I mean, I think it's the console of choice for the majority of gamers today. Younger kids just getting into games, that's what they want is a 360, but go PS3.
Yeah. PS3.
The only downfall for me with PS3 is I'm on my 3rd. I had 2 yellow lights of death, and maybe it's just
bad. I mean, that's really a downfall, though. I mean, look at the other system. I mean, my Xbox 360 that I own currently has been sent back 4 times, I think.
That is the I think that's the reason why newer consoles aren't on here is there's so many problems that haven't been worked out yet.
Right. How many times did you send back number 1 on the list?
The patching, you go put in a game on as soon as you get it and you can't play it for 3 hours because you have to download a patch and then it has to update, then the system has to update.
I mean, that's a downfall of the PS3 as well. Because how many times do you log on like, alright, I'm going to play this, you put it in, it's like, oh, it's got an update, and then you switch back to like TV or whatever, like, oh, let it do that, and then you never go back. Like 2 days later you come in, your PS3's on, you're like, oh, I was downloading that patch.
I will say the PlayStation 3 controller is probably my favorite controller of all time. I love it. It fits perfect in my hand. The button layout is great for me. I love it. The only thing about the PlayStation controllers I don't like are the L2 and R2.
Yeah.
Because I'm never there. I'm always on L1 and R1. I can do those quick, but it seems like when you have to use all 4, it's awkward. I don't want to do double fingers at the top, and so you're moving. I'd rather those be in a
That's why
different spot.
Number 2 on the list is probably my favorite controller of all time.
It's a good one.
It's probably the best. But anyway, the PS3's got solid games.
Actually, maybe 5 years ago, I would have been on the fence about PlayStation 3, but in the last 5 years, that thing has kicked out some absolutely great experiences that are only on PlayStation.
Yeah.
They're not for both.
I've got one of the best things I've done with my PS3 is downloaded game was that costume quest or whatever. Probably one of the best games I've ever played. I mean, I just like vegged out like I'm gonna beat this game. Like this was fun. I mean, it was just a.
I don't even know about that.
It's a great game. It's like an RPG where you're just like it's like a cartoon looking. You're a little kid. You like roller skate around and you pick up pieces of different costumes and then you use those powers.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best games I've played.
I bet I've got 65 games for PlayStation 3, if I had to guess. And that's probably the most games I've owned for any system, like that I've gone out and bought. And I just like, someone gave me 75, a cardboard box of 75 Atari games. But
there's like 5 ETs in here.
I've invested a lot of money into it, but I think it's well worth it.
Yeah,
it's a great system. It's and then I think those games are going to hold up for a long time.
Yeah, I do.
Number 7, and what's going to be a double shot of Sega coming up, is the Dreamcast. Way ahead of its time.
Very.
I think that's the first system for me that coming out of those awkward teen years in the coming out of PS1 and 64, and then you move to a Dreamcast. You're like, whoa,
it was like a more mature.
This is cool.
This thing can go online.
Yeah, first one online. The controller was, you picked it up.
It was a bit
crazy, and then triggers in the back.
And you had the little VMU.
Yeah.
Fit down in there, and you could pull it out and like play like a Game Boy,
like
you
throw your Tamagotchi on.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a cool idea. I didn't use it, but it is a very cool idea. I mean, I like the thought behind that. I think they could have integrated it a little more into the game itself and been like, hey, I got like 50 points on this.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, like sweet.
I think we got into it at the same time out at the House of Fairview. We maybe. I think we picked one up at a GameStop or something.
Where we got the first one, yeah.
Got like 10 games or something with cheap, $50 or something for the whole console. Vegged on Virtual Tennis and Shinmu for
that Virtual Tennis,
6
we played
months.
that forever.
Yeah, the great games. What was Jet Grind Radio?
Just a grind.
Yeah, it was a fun game, fun time, fun like time killer.
Well, the Dreamcast also fell into the same spot that the Xbox did for me because it was easily modded.
Yeah.
And then I remember we burnt the Nestor disc for it, and then it was like,
or did we?
We didn't, but we could have. And then we were just like, oh my god, this is great.
Yeah.
We finally played Mike Tyson's Punch-Out on the Dreamcast. Like,
yeah.
That's what I needed.
So the I think emulation was big for maybe 2 years around there, but it was all PC stuff, and everybody was still in like dial-up, so it was kind of a weird. I remember when we got the Nestor, like when we first got it running, we got 1 or 2 games running. I stayed up 24 hours and downloaded every NES game, and we burnt that, and it was well worth it.
Yeah, it was. It was. What did that run on? Windows ME, something like that.
Yeah,
it was something stupid like that. Yeah.
One of the worst operating systems ever made.
Horrible, right? But it made a pretty cool game console.
It did. I think it was real big on sports games, and that may have caused its demise. Because, I mean, you get a few people that like those, but you got to have your core games in there. Sega seems to always struggle with first party stuff. They get their Sonic, but outside of that, you're just like, what else?
But Sonic hasn't really been solid since
Genesis.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest.
I almost threw CD in there, or that Sega the Sonic Spinball.
Yeah.
I kind of like that game. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. All right, number 6, the Sega Genesis. Again, controller-wise,
good.
One of the better.
Good. Yes.
It had the curve.
Yeah.
3-button, 6-button.
Some had 6.
Where you had the little like blue buttons above.
No, that was the Saturn. The Genesis had they were still smaller at the top, but I think they were still black.
Were they? Yeah. Same setup though. But good controller, good fit in the hand, good games. You know.
That's one where it has just like maybe around 700, 600 games, something like that, and I'd say a good 40% of them are really fun and great, and everybody you put them in right now and play for hours.
It still looks pretty good too if you think about it. I mean, if you put like Alter Beast in and fire that up, you're kind of like,
I don't know if I'd hit on Alter Beast.
What?
I'd jump over to something else.
What? Legendary X?
Streets of Rage, maybe. I think Alter Beast was one of the first games that came out.
I know, and I think it, like when you were a kid and you got that, like, okay, put this in, and you fired it up, you were like, wow, and today if I fired that up, I saw like that's because it had that arcade look to it. I think.
Yeah, Genesis
was big and like
and that was the first one that kind of touted like, I'll bring the arcade system home, and it was close to it. It was like where I think the NES would talk about it, but when you brought it home, you're like, well, that's not right. Wasn't as bad as the Atari days. This is not Pac-Man.
Yeah, this is horrible. Yes, but you have to consider it on the Sega I mean, it was like the core system was awesome, right? And then they started adding, and then you had the 32X, and you were like, okay, right, and then you had
the CD with another power
with the 32X, and then you were like, man, it's like a transformer. Like, what is this thing?
Which would have been a lot better if they would have made like a all-in-one.
Yeah, just made it like a system.
One power supply. Right. I think it would have done better, but I think they were just trying to keep up and then maintain, because then you had other systems coming out that were doing better, but that was really its downfall. But the Genesis, the regular Genesis,
good core system.
Go out if you come across one in a flea market,
pick it up. I had ones in my kitchen.
Still looks great. But also play on a CRT.
Yeah. Yes, dude. I still have one of those too. I have a 36-inch.
All right, number 5 is one I actually have never really played outside of an emulator too.
Which is sad.
And it's the TurboGrafx 16 CD. We would have just gone with the TurboGrafx 16, but the CD, which came out a few years later, that was just a CD add-on, but it worked great. It plugged into the back. It was one power supply, and then you could play CD-based games and also the HuCard games.
Which was incredible to them, by the way. I remember the first time, like, because I got one. I mean, it was a long time ago when I got mine, and when I first got it, I was like, "What is this thing?" I had a little credit card like game that I was like, "This is gonna be horrible." But to my surprise, as soon as I started, I was like, "Oh my god, I can't stop!" And I was hooked, man. I mean, I loved my turbo game. It had like the detachable back, the thing that came off the back, and I think mine was broke and like taped on, but I played the crap out of that thing.
Yeah, like I said, I never really actually owned one or played one, an actual one, but got into it since the emulator days because Steve had talked about how much he loved his, and man, I can't believe how many great games. Like I'll just kind of look through them, and then you like I think we talked about Bloody Wolf the other day. I expected to play it for 5 seconds, and ended up playing for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
This game was great.
Devil's Crush. I remember that was probably like it was a pinball game, and I played, and I mean, it was like, man, alive, I hadn't played this game so long. I mean, it was just ridiculous how long I played the game.
I remember one of the first video game Olympics we did. We had was it Alien Crush, I think?
Yeah.
And Jeff Fiji was on there for about 16 straight hours.
We just pretty well left him alone.
It was out of control on one ball, and he played for. I mean, it was a retarded amount of time where everybody was just like, well, let's just go home.
Yeah.
Let's call it right now.
It's a classic game, the classic system, man. I know we talked about this beforehand a couple days ago. And I didn't research it, and I know you didn't research it. But there was a game that I played on there, and I can't remember the name of it. Maybe Josh here. By the way, Josh Eggerson's with us today. He's our in-studio audience. Whatever. Anyway, there was a game. It was a RPG, but you had a remote control car. And that's what you built up. Like, you raced against people, and you got like, golden wheels, and it made your car more powerful. I mean, it was fun. It was like, man, but it was like one of the first like RPGs I really got into. Like, this game is great. It was like the same style though. You walked around like a battle, but it was racing cars. So I was like, this is awesome. And I swear to God, I can't remember the name of it. And I was supposed to look it up for this, and I didn't.
You don't see that too often anymore. Like,
I know, me forgetting something.
No, people, the game developers like kind of treading in that territory. Like, well, this is like a racing game, but it's an RPG. Right. Like, you just don't see that anymore. Everybody plays it safe.
It was fun though, man. I mean, it was one of the things that made it great for me then. And the controller. Yeah, I mean, the controller was a Nintendo controller.
It was very NES. Like, I think it kind of tapered up a little bit.
Maybe a tad, not much, but it had 2 little sliders on it for turbo. Yeah, and I thought, that's pretty neat. Yeah. Come with it.
I think it was probably most well known for the shoot 'em ups. I think that's what everybody
probably like the spaceship. Like,
either straight up or
side. Radius, isn't that one of them? Something like that. Anyway.
Aerial Blaster, which when I go through and play them, they're all real fun. Like, I find myself, playing it longer than I should just to try games out. I'm like, I've been playing this for 45 minutes.
I'm out of time.
I gotta get to work.
Jeez. But yeah, that's the TurboGrafx. So I mean, it was a good console. So we'll move on to number 4. Number 4 is the Atari 7800. We had a little debate about this one as well. Cody really wanted a 2600, which I will give him is the classic that started it all. But the 7800 had a couple games that you couldn't play on the 2600, but I could play every 2600 game on the 78, so that's why it made it as high as it did.
And it played 5200 games?
Mm-hmm. I played them all.
So they were all the same size cards?
Yeah. Now, you did have like the weird, like ColecoVision games that would work in like a 2600.
Yeah.
But you had to like kind of cram it in, and it was real tight. Like, man, I probably shouldn't do this, but it would still fire up like, oh, sweet.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they would all play in the 7800. The controller on the 7800 was kind of longer, had 2 red buttons and a joystick.
Yeah.
Granted, the 2600 controller, 1 joystick, 1 button was was still a classic standby.
I'm sitting down to play Frogs and Flies for a few hours.
Right, that's what I want to use.
Yeah.
I agreed, but
was it an actual joystick or was it just a turn knob?
No, I don't think it. I don't know. I don't remember if it turned knob or not. I don't think so. I think that was just like the paddles, basically, is what they called it on the
paddles.
I still call it a paddle. I know, but you had to use paddles for the like palm type games.
You know you're old when you're doing your.
I know, right? Hey, can I have that paddle? Give me a controller.
But anyway, I think those games still hold up incredibly well. Like, if you go back and play, even as far back as the 2600, if you're playing like basketball, which is just like some blocks.
It's 2 sticks and a pixel, basically.
And it just doesn't look like it would be as fun as it actually is. Because you just find yourself playing it for a long time. And to me, that is the ultimate like local two-player experience that you can ever have. If you go back and play combat, Frogs and Flies is a great one. Basketball, ice hockey.
I think one of the great things about that
if you got the guy sitting right next to you and you got one button, and there's really no like advantage that the other player's going to have. It's just basically straight up who's got the better reflexes.
But going back to the combat, right? Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things about that is the sound. Yeah. Because when two people are using that joystick, man, and like going against each other, you can tell they're putting like all the pressure in the world. Like, it's just like a grinding. Like, man, that is nasty on that controller. Like trying to get around the cloud before the other guy, and you're just like following. He's like, come on, you. Like,
great, because you had the tanks, then you had the like propeller plane, and then the jets.
Yeah. But the fun thing about Atari, and they did this a lot, was it was the exact same game on the cartridge. But they had 78 variations of it. So it was like, this one's got clouds. This one has controllable bullets, so you can move it up and down. This one, you disappear every once in a while.
But really kind of made it a whole new different game.
I agree. If you try to play tanks, non-controllable, firing, like ammo, and then the next one you can't control, it's like, get around that corner. So
combat is always a huge proponent of our video game Olympics tournament. There's always a combat tournament.
It's the best. I mean, it's a solid game. We still go back to it to this day. So. Yeah. But the reason the 7800 made it on the list, by the way, a quick story. I remember when it came out, we went to the TG&Y at Madison, which is an ancient store that no longer exists. But in the back, they had it set up, and they had pole position 2 on it. And I swear to God, like me and my brother went in, and we were like back there playing it the whole time, and it was just like, look how real that looks, man. It looks like I'm in a real Indy car. Like, this is just awesome. And then we left, and like my dad, like he was like, well, I'll be back. I'm gonna go to the store. But he drove all the way back to Madison, picked it up, and then brought it back. Like, hey, I bought that. And we were just like, awesome. and like the next, that was my summer. Like, oh my God. So that's why that was so high on my list. By the way,
that's a good one.
It was just cool, and I think the 7800 is a solid system.
Moving on to number 3, the PS2. I mean, what can you say? It's the best-selling system of all time. Its games library is out of control. I mean, it's 2,000, I think.
Yeah, everybody I know owns 2,000 PS2 games somehow.
There's just a million games, and that was. That to me was like like right out of the awkward phase. That was the ultimate like, okay, now they perfected that style, and then I think we're back into like an awkward like we got back into HD. We're feeling it out. So hopefully by the next PS4,
the next cycle will be straightened out. Let's hope. But the PS2, they came out with a modem,
hard drive too.
Hard drive. I mean,
bought them all. Never used them.
I used the modem because I played Final Fantasy on
mine. Yeah, that's what the hard drive was for too.
And that was
it was
fun.
That was one of the low points of this system. But I mean, you had Grand Theft Auto 3 first came out on that, which that to me was our first like just. It's 6 in the morning. Oh, it's 8 at night. Oh, it's 6 in the morning. Like, oh, we really need.
We bought like the whole. I remember you got like that whole soundtrack, like the whole pack thing, man. I mean, it was just the soundtrack on that was amazing.
Remember, I was on the poster.
Yeah.
We put the poster up on the wall. And isn't that Cody? I have to put the picture.
The PS3 or PS2 also had the controller that you are a fan of.
Love it. Yeah, it's
still the same controller basically as today, except wireless, of course. But now the PS2 did have a memory card. We talked about earlier, and I know there for a while it was like the game save files got so big that you had like 2 games on one. Because you'd get like the cheap one, it'd be like, oh, this is however many they were.
Weird colors.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But it only held like 2 game saves. So then you'd have like 50, like, no, I know I got one on here somewhere, like, and that kind of got a little annoying, but...
Yeah, and I think for me, the worst part about the memory card system was, like, when I first bought it, I was basically living at Steve's house for a little bit, and then after that, I moved down to town and had 2 roommates, so we were all playing it, we all had our own memory cards. So then when you were like trying to find yours, you would just pull out one and be like, Steve 2, Steve 4, what's on Steve 4? So then you had to put it in and look it up, be like, no, it's not on that.
Yeah.
But those things filled up way too quickly.
Yeah.
And then,
that got a little daunting. Yeah. But the system itself, the games, the controller, it worked.
Shadows of Destiny.
Oh my God, right?
Homunculus.
Yeah.
That was day one purchase for it. I think I bought All Star Baseball and Shadows of Destiny, and then I don't think Steve even knew I bought it. I hooked it up at his house, and then when he came home from work, then we went back to like Walmart to buy more games.
Yeah.
They didn't have very many. I think we ended up getting some fighting game Square made. It was like a beat 'em up. It was terrible. Really? We were like, look how awesome it looks. We don't even care about the game. I forgot what it was.
Streets of Rage.
Yes. But then I think you bought Gran Turismo came out pretty soon after that, and then after that it was just like you're buying 3 games a week, and it was just like, oh my God, it's so...
spent a lot of money, and the collection got huge.
Yeah.
You know, it was a nice. I love the system.
When someone says PlayStation 2, what's the first game that comes to mind? Like where that's to you?
Probably Metal Gear. I don't know why.
Metal Gear 2.
Yeah. I don't know why. I think when I first started to play Metal Gear Solid 2, like when I first started to play, I was just like, this is nuts. This is nuts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was just it was fun. Another update coming in.
This just in.
The Bouncer.
The Bouncer. That was the game.
That was it. Yeah.
And it was terrible.
It was terrible. Yeah, it was the same game though, right? As every other of those. Like it had the big you know,
guy.
the big guy,
Haggard,
the little
guy,
the little
Cody.
scrawny, like kicker fast guy, like
Oh, I don't think the big guy in this one was the mayor.
But he had a mustache, like, and threw everybody over his shoulder. That was the best. But yeah, so that Metal Gear is probably what's thinking. What about you?
Probably Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yeah,
I mean, that might be the one everybody thinks of. Which, going back, maybe Vice City's the best out of that. I think a lot of people say San Andreas, but Vice City was, I think for me, it was just because it was like the 80s and had
Vice City was the best.
It was really fun.
Yeah. There's no topping that one to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was probably one of my favorites. Alright, let's move on. Anyway, number 2, the Super NES. I did have this tagged as my number 1 on my list.
I can see that.
I mean, to be honest, you know, and I've said this 1,000 times, but out of everything on this whole list, this is what I logged the most time on. I mean, this was like 3 summers long for me. Like
that might have been prime video game age.
Yeah,
that was the golden.
It was like that's what I do.
Summer break.
Yeah.
After school. That was
the controller. It was round. Had 2 top buttons. You had 4 other buttons. You know, I was just, to me, it was like, that is a solid controller, man. Like, if I could play PS3 games today on that controller, I would.
The story for the Super Nintendo for me is going to Kevin Stone's house in East Enterprise to just one afternoon to play Nintendo because he had it over there, and that's just what we did over there. And his sister was playing Mario for the Nintendo, and he just goes like, "Hey, you want to go up and get a Super Nintendo from SNS?"
Yeah.
But that concept wasn't even something that I even thought of. Like that Nintendo would make another system.
Yeah.
That's Nintendo. That's what I'll play for the rest of my life. And I remember being just very like, "What's a Super Nintendo?" I thought it was just like a jacked up Nintendo. There's 2 Nintendos.
Oh, it's
and you can play 2 games. Yeah, had no clue. And he was just like, "No, it's a new system." And I couldn't even realize what that was. He even went and got it, and I was just looking at it like, what is this?
Don't tell me the game you got. I'll tell you after you're done.
Oh, it was just Mario World.
Oh,
It was the first game that he put in. I don't know what we rented that day, but I specifically remember him turning it on and putting Mario in, and just my mind was blown. From that point on, like that's when I knew, like, oh, I'm going to be doing this a long time in my life. Look how amazing that was. And what's cool about that is I remember getting that, you know, the whenever Christmas was after that. Getting the Nintendo and then saying to my parents, which was kind of silly to say, like, it came with Mario. You never need another game. That is the greatest game. And then, like, you know, a few years down the line, of course, you had 40 games for it. But to think about it now, you really don't need another game. That Mario World is that good of a game.
Yeah.
Where you can just sit down and play that for hours.
I'm pretty sure it was about 2 months ago. I went to Josh Dickerson's house. He had a Super Nintendo, and I played Super Mario World the whole time I was there, basically, like. I was like, oh, I know. And the funny thing is, I remember, there's a secret ghost house here. You just get free lives, and then I'm going to get the red exclamation point so I can get up here. Like.
I think that maybe Mario World, and to some extent maybe Mario 3, is the only game that if you're a 5-year-old boy, a 16-year-old girl, or a 68-year-old woman, or a 26-year-old guy, like everybody would just pick that up and be like, this is really fun and I like playing it. Yeah. That's what they would say. And I don't know any other games where that would be the case.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really amazing thing about that system. Or if you're like, I really like racing games, or I really like sports games, or I like RPGs or whatever.
It had it.
But you didn't just only buy those games. You had all of them. Like, everybody had a sports game and everybody had a racing game. Like, it didn't matter. It was a fun game, so you played it. And we don't do that as much anymore. Like, if you're the RPG guy, you just buy RPGs,
right.
And that's what you play, or you just buy sports games.
I got Madden and some baseball games. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I remember because Colorcraft in town, the video store place, they had that's where we rented ours from for the first year. Like, but I remember getting it like on Friday night, like, oh my god, and just like we played Mario and F-Zero, the stupid racing game. We played the crap out of it. It's horrible. I don't know if you played it recently, but
F-Zero?
Yeah,
it's tough.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard.
It is very.
It seems like there's no rails.
Yeah.
And you're just constantly hitting everything, hitting electrocuted.
That's why I picked the big green one, because it took more damage, but it was slow.
Yeah.
But I love the SNES, man. It is my favorite console. So
There you go. There's only one thing that could possibly take the number one spot.
3DO. No, just kidding. Just
CDI. All right, course number one is the NES.
Of course.
Maybe not as definitive as Superman was on the last episode, but what can you say about the NES? I think it really was the first one to be like, here's what it should be.
Yeah, I mean, you had games before it. You had Atari and
not to say Atari was bad. Atari did a good job.
it was great. But when the Nintendo came out, it was like a phenomenon. I mean, everybody was just like in a rage to get a Nintendo.
I think you go from Atari, where you had to use a lot of your imagination, and they were fun, and they're still fun. But Nintendo was the first one where it was telling you a story,
right?
And you're like, oh, I can get into this.
Yeah.
You put in DuckTales, and you're like, well, that's Scrooge McDuck. That's not a square, and that's the DuckTales theme song that I'm listening to. So I think that when you're 8, 10 years old, when that system comes out, that really makes an impact on you.
Well, and it's like you said. I mean, how many people do you know who owned a Nintendo? Everyone. I don't know a single person to this day who didn't own it. Even people who today don't play video games, or are like, oh no, I never really played video games. Like, do you have a Nintendo? Oh yeah, I had a Nintendo. Like, of course you did.
Of course.
Everyone did.
Yeah.
The guy who works on cars all day long. You're like, oh yeah, I had a Nintendo. I used to play Mario on it. Like, that's it. I mean, I played non-stop when I got mine. A lot of like if we were to do a top 10 games list,
a lot of those.
A lot of them would be off the Nintendo, most likely.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, I love to play this game.
Yeah, it's to me it's the easiest system to go back to.
Yeah.
Like if you're just like, I just finished The Last of Us on PlayStation 3, and you could either play the next game that's out for PlayStation 3, or you can go back and play some Mario 3, or whatever, Mega Man 2.
Yeah.
And then
Castlevania.
They seem they never age. We're like, sometimes when you go back to even the Nintendo 64, or PlayStation 1, when you go back to those, when you're looking at them, you're like, I don't remember it looking like this. When you go back to Nintendo, you're like, no, I remember it looking exactly like this.
This is exactly what I play.
And it's still really good.
And you brought up Mario 3, which I think. I have this battle constantly. Is it Mario 3 or Super Mario World? If I was to pick, it would be really hard to choose, but probably Mario 3 would win out.
Yeah. I think the suits are better, or like maybe more fun to jump into a Kabuki shoe or the Tanuki suit. I don't know.
I don't know if it's better or more fun. Just for some reason, to me, it's like, if I went back to play one and it was like, all right, like this is the only one you're ever going to get to play again, I'd be like, yeah, I'll take Mario 3.
Yeah. The only thing I think that Mario World is really superior on, the controls seem a little tighter when you play it. And then obviously the game size is larger there, but it's incredible what they did with Mario 3.
As opposed to 1?
Yeah.
That was my next comment, was like, just look at the leap forward they made from Mario 1, look at Mario, and then look at Mario 3 Mario.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just compare them, like if you took them out and compared them side by side, you'd be like, that's crazy. I mean, it's the exact same system, exact same power. Nothing changed. They just were like, man, that looks a lot cooler than this guy does.
The story for me that sticks out for the Nintendo is my brother worked in
Super Mario Brothers 2.
No.
No.
My brother worked in tobacco like one whole summer just to get to save up the money, and went out and bought it, and we were just so pumped up about it. And he puts in Mario and hits the first block to get the mushroom, and the mushroom comes out, and he just runs out of the way like, what is that? I was like, I don't know. So I remember getting the manual out and was just like, it'll make you bigger. It was just like, it's really crazy. Like, oh, get it, pick it up. Like, we're just yelling at each other, and then God, I remember just playing that for. It had to have been a month, like a month straight of just playing. That's all that you're thinking about. There's nothing else going on in your head as you when you get that one. I wonder if that'll be the same case for like kids today, like if, in the PlayStation 4. I'm sure they'll be excited, but then after like a week, they're just like.
But I think the thing about it is they get on there and they got their headsets and they're yelling at somebody else, like it's like, man, this isn't even nearly as fun. But that's because we're old.
Maybe.
Maybe to them, maybe it's like, how did you play this, Dad? Like.
What I do love is, I now that I've got the Hyperspin hooked up in the living room, I worried that Ben, because his first system was the PS3,
right?
Would he be able to go back? And he loves playing like Atari and Nintendo. Loves it. Like he has to do it all the time.
Haven't got there yet, so we'll see.
In a few years.
I'm intrigued to see what happens here. So I hope they play the classics.
They will.
That's the plan. But yeah, the NES is number one on the list, of course. I mean. Can't go wrong.